You may be seated. How is everyone doing today? Good. Thumbs? Let's see it. Lots of up. How about you guys? Any thumbs? Yeah? Okay, great. I was here yesterday and I was feeling so excited and great because I had just come from seeing what was going on in wrestling and all these kids involved and senior school students helping, and it was just so impressive, and it just made me feel so good about where I work. And then today it was neat because I was walking around with someone, a guest at the school, who was taking a look at a few things, and he just said, "This sort of feels like a magical place." And I'm like, for real, it is. So there's something special at the school, and I hope you feel it. But I'm feeling pretty good right now because I'm really appreciative of our nice little QMS school. Today, the power of storytelling. Mr. Saylor and I started chatting about his talk near the beginning of the year, and there was just some work to continue to do, and then we got to a time where we had to figure out when he's going to do it, and we saw this day today as a perfect time because it hadn't been booked yet. But the theme is be kind, and I was like, oh, we'll fit it in, it's okay, it doesn't really work. But then I thought about it a little bit more and what storytelling does for us. And does anybody know what storytelling does for us? What do you think? When we share stories with people, what happens? Yeah. Oh, he raised your hand. Okay, you don't have to answer that. Does anybody have any thoughts on what happens when we share stories with each other? Yes, well, connection. Absolutely, connection. It's actually happens. So I know that many of you may be sitting with, you've experienced sitting with someone and all of a sudden you're sharing a story and you're starting to feel connected and you're just like, oh, that's neat. I'm starting to get to trust this person and I feel more connected. But what's actually going on in our bodies is a hormonal shift. So dopamine is released and oxytocin is released. Oxytocin is known as the trust hormone. And so those are increasing as we are sitting, and that's why we feel that connection, right? And so the power of story is real, and it's important, and I'd like to ask Mr. Saylor to come up, talk a little bit more about that, and share a story with us. Thanks.
Good morning, welcome, respected elders, friends, and our sacred students. As many of you may know, I'm Mr. Saylor and I teach our Indigenous Studies class at the grade 12 level. This is something that I, as a non-Indigenous person, have struggled with. How to accurately and respectfully share stories of people that I am not a part of. Yet each week we gather together to share and celebrate the stories of those in these communities, both locally and globally. We also share our own stories, and in this learning, come to know each other. Here in this chapel, we also gather to share stories from our community, and yet there are those in our Indigenous community who we hear from only occasionally, most often in September, when, during Orange Shirt Day, we center the suffering of residential schools and the pain that has caused. But we rarely take the time outside of our schedule to celebrate and uplift the stories of these people and their cultures. As we are gathered here today in this House of Stories, I wanted to change that. I wanted to share the stories of this place so that they may again be passed down through the generations. I want shared stories to become part of a shared future. I do not wish to center myself or claim these stories, but rather to uplift and celebrate them, to share a different perspective to help us see that maybe it's not so different at all. Some people may say I'm not the right person to share these stories, and they may be right, but I share these stories with Aich Squalowin, with good heart and good intentions, to share these stories so that they may be appreciated. Ojibwe writer Richard Wagamese speaks of sharing stories in this way. In the dark depths of long winter nights, spirits slumber too, and allow their stories to be told. These are the storytelling moons. Elders and storytellers who have been given tales to carry speak softly, reverentially, and people hear them. They do not merely listen, they hear. To hear is to have a spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical connection, reaction to the words. Sometimes, at very special times, you may have all four and be changed forever. Share stories. Fill cold nights with the warmth of your connections, your relationships. Hear each other and be made more. That is the power of storytelling. I invite you to consider this perspective. Stories are the root of belonging. Stories are how we make sense of the world and our place in it. Stories are how we spread around the globe, divided and united ourselves based upon the stories of our peoples, our nations, and our histories. The root of history is story. The wars we have fought, the leaders we have uplifted, the monuments we have built, all have a foundation in story. In my opinion, stories are the most powerful force in the world, and the pen is indeed mightier than the sword. For what directs the sword if not the pen? This is why it is so important to understand each other's stories, to hear them. In this act of sharing and understanding, we can be kind to each other. We can begin to truly see the bigger picture, how similar we are, what unites us rather than divides us. So hear this now. Sit and truly listen to a story, no doubt different than your own. A story that was old when the old growth was young. A story passed down through generations by oral history on this coast. A story about creation. A story about belonging. Maybe you'll draw parallels between this story and others you have heard. Maybe you'll hear a narrative that relates to our modern world. Maybe you'll see the similarities others have missed, and maybe you'll find a moral all your own. And maybe, just maybe, you'll hear it and be changed, in some small way come to a new understanding. But no matter how you interpret it, just take a moment to close your eyes and enjoy it, because in the end, all stories should be enjoyed. This particular story has been told many times by storytellers better than I. This version has been adapted from the written version of the Haida storyteller Bill Reed in concert with Robert Bringhurst. Bill, in turn, gives credit to the master storyteller, Henry Young. Versions of this story appear all up and down the Northwest Coast in many different Indigenous nations. But now, in this house of stories, underneath these storytelling moons, close your eyes and cast your mind back to a time when all was black. Now, in this blackness, there was Raven, who had always been and will always be. But he found the darkness a great inconvenience as he searched for food, as he made his way about the world, as he tried to change and interpret things. And in all this blackness, Raven was searching alone until he came to a house by a river. And in this house, he heard a voice, and the voice was singing, "I have a box, and in that box I have a smaller box, and in that box is a smaller box still, and many, many smaller boxes, until in the smallest box of all, I have all the light in the universe." Now this intrigued Raven greatly, for what greater treasure could there be than all the light in the world, the ability to see that which was not there yet. And so Raven knew, I must have this treasure. But that was easier said than done. And as Raven sat scheming, looking for a way into the house, he found that all the walls were smooth and blank, absent any crevice or crack or hinge for which he could enter. Now, this did not stop Raven, and as he sat listening and pondering, he would occasionally hear the voice of the old man who talked about the boxes leave the house to go to the river to fetch water. However, he always left from the opposite side of the house that Raven was on, no matter how he searched, no matter where he waited. However, as Raven watched and waited, he came to know that the old man was not the only one in the house, for he had a daughter too. Now, whether this daughter was as plain as an earthworm beneath the soil, or as beautiful as the sunrise on the fronds of a cedar, who could tell? For all was dark, but Raven devised a plan. He waited and listened for the soft, light footsteps of the young woman as she went to fetch water, and silently he followed along behind her until at the edge of the creek he transformed himself into a hemlock needle and slipped into the stream to be floated down and picked up in her water bowl. Now, even in this very small, diminished form of a hemlock needle, he still had enough magic to work to make her incredibly thirsty, so that she must take a drink. And as she lifted the bowl to her lips, he slipped down inside her stomach, and there he nestled and went to sleep. Now the young woman went back into the house, and 9 months later she gave birth to a little boy. Now, this little boy was not any ordinary little boy, for he had some feathers here and there, and he had a long beak, and he had the bright, mischievous eyes of the raven, if only there was light to see them. And with the three of them in the house, the boy, his mother, and the grandfather, they played and they sang songs, and the grandfather came to love his grandchild, as grandfathers are ought to do, and he would do anything to please his grandchild, as grandparents have from the beginning of time. And Raven, for his part, searched the house looking for the box that contained all the light in the world, checking every crack and corner until in a nave at the back of the house he found a box that he knew must have the light. And so very slowly he lifted the lid, but his grandfather heard his precious treasure being disturbed and admonished the boy, threatened him with dire punishments. But the raven child pleaded and begged and asked forgiveness and told his grandfather, if only I had the largest box, I would be satisfied, I would be entertained. And so his grandfather relented and gave him the largest of the boxes. And of course, the raven child was entertained for a while. But as grandchildren are ought to do, he got bored of his plaything, and so with careful cajoling and pleading, he asked his grandfather for the second box. Now, this went on for months, some say years, perhaps even centuries. And slowly, as the boxes dwindled, getting smaller and smaller in size, a dim light began to suffuse the house so that shapes could be made out. And Raven knew he was getting close to all the light in the world, until at last there was a single box, so small, with light peeking out the corners, and Raven knew at last he was close to his treasure. And so he pleaded and begged with his grandfather, "If only I could see the light inside the box, I would be happy." And as grandfathers from the beginning of time have done, he gave in to the wishes of his grandchild and lifted the lid of the box. It was at this time, when the light sprang out of the box, that Raven knew he had seized his treasure. He grasped it in his beak and transformed back into his raven form and escaped through the smoke hole in the top of the house, carrying the light and looking for the first time upon the mountains and the valleys and the rivers and the seas, marveling at what a wonder the world is, how beautiful it is to see. But in all his wonder and excitement, he did not see that another was watching him. The eagle had opened his eyes and seen the world for the first time, saw his quarry, and began to pursue the raven, who did not notice the king of the birds until it was right upon him, reaching with its talons to seize him. And as Raven squawked and avoided the talons by mere centimeters, he opened his beak and dropped half of the light of the world, where it bounced upon the ground and shattered into 1,000,000,000,000 pieces that bounced into the sky and became the stars. Yet still Eagle pursued Raven out beyond the horizon, farther than anyone had ever gone, until at last Raven, exhausted, dropped the final piece of the light, where it split into two and became the sun and the moon. And the old man, well, he looked upon his daughter's face for the first time and saw she was as beautiful as the fronds of the cedar in a sunrise. And he wept, for he had kept that beauty hidden from the world. I love this story because it is mystical, because it is magical, because it speaks of the mythos of this wild, wet coast, which I love so much. I love this story because I see the stories that I grew up with reflected in it, be it the Big Bang, in which all of the matter of the universe was compressed into an infinitely small point before it expanded, or the virgin birth of Jesus bringing light to the world. In seeing these similarities between our stories, we can all be a little more human, a little more kind. And in admiring the differences, we can see the vast variation in humankind. Consider, these parallels may just be coincidences, but they may also be a part of a bigger story. Thank you.
So first, I just want to thank Mr. Saylor for just a masterclass in storytelling today. For those of you who don't know Mr. Saylor, from what I've gleaned, there's such a philosopher in there, a poet, someone who embraces culture, someone who strives to be open-minded and understand what the truth in the world is for him on his path, and I think probably attention to stories and listening to stories from all sorts of people, from all sorts of cultures, is what helps build that sort of mindset and what helps build that sort of capacity within you. And I also mentioned yesterday, I just see him as a real sort of purveyor of positive male archetypes as well. So just a really great sort of symbol of some important qualities in life that you hold. So thank you so much for coming and sharing that with us today. I think it's always important to mention, nobody ever has to get up here and speak. People don't have to come and present, and I think it tells you a lot about their measure when they do make that decision and put themselves out there. So yeah, I think just an extraordinary performance, and again, thank you so much. I think also one of the things that really impressed me was how he managed to stay so engaged and committed to the story when there were some distractions in the congregation and in the audience as he was trying to tell this story. And I just think it's always it's a reminder for us as well, is that you're a valuable part of every experience, of every moment, in every room that you're in. Your body language, how you carry yourself, what does that say about your qualities? And who you're trying to be, and how you're trying to support someone else who might be doing something really hard. And so, for me as a school, we should care about those things. And as a QMS student, we've got to hold ourselves to really high standards. This is probably moving through one of the toughest times of the year. Second term's always a bit of a tricky one with the light, and the fatigue sets in, and so I get it from that standpoint. But I think let's really learn from moments like that for a number of us who affected that story for others. Please let's make sure we've got a couple of weeks left of term. You are a really valuable member of every single space that you're in, and we all contribute to other people's experiences around us. So let's make those as good as we can for each other. Enjoy the rest of the term. Have a really good day. Bon appetit. It's lunchtime. Thank you.